My best friend sold me life insurance, then tried to murder me. The man I called my best friend sold me $1 million life insurance policy on a Tuesday with a pen and a smile. 24 hours later, he looked me dead in the eye, his expression unchanged, as he raised a shotgun to my face and pulled the trigger. My name is Jake Miller. For most of my life, I thought I could trust two people with my life, my wife, and my best friend, David. He was the one who sold me the insurance policy. She was the one who stood to collect a fortune. Together, they meticulously planned my murder down to the last detail. But they made one critical mistake. For 3 agonizing months, they thought they had succeeded. Celebrating on my grave, I had to become a ghost, watching from the shadows as they spent my money and lived in my house, waiting for the perfect moment to drag them into the very grave they had dug for me. Our lives were so completely intertwined. It was impossible to see where my family ended and David began. He wasn't just a friend, he was the brother I never had. When I married my wife, he was my best man, standing beside me, telling the whole room jokes about how she'd finally tied me down. When our daughter Maya was born, he was right there in the waiting room, the first person to hold her after me. He was the first person I'd call if I ever got in trouble, and he would always show up, no questions asked. We even had a sacred tradition, the same hunting trip, to the same remote spot by the lake, every single year for a decade. It was our escape from the world. I remember the day he first brought up the life insurance. It felt so casual, so normal. We were in my garage, the smell of oil and gasoline in the air as we worked on my old car. He clapped me on the shoulder, all smiles, $1 million. Jake, he said, his voice full of what I thought was genuine concern. A man with a family needs to make sure they're taken care of, no matter what. He even used my daughter as the hook. Think about Maya, he'd said. This isn't for you, it's for them. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. Waving in a hurricane I refused to see. My wife had become distant, always asking about our finances, complaining we didn't have enough. I just thought it was the stress of daily life. I knew David was ambitious with money, always chasing some new, risky deal that never quite panned out. But I never imagined I was the deal. I signed the paperwork without a second thought, because my best friend and my wife were the beneficiaries, the two people I trusted most. I walked onto that final hunting trip completely blind, never suspecting that their entire world was about to be built on top of my grave. But their perfect plan had one tiny flaw they never considered, a single detail that would unravel everything. The day it happened started like any other hunting trip. The air was cold, the sky a flat, miserable gray. We walked the familiar path toward the lake, our boots crunching on damp leaves. We joked just like we always did. But something was off. David was quiet, distant, his eyes scanning the woods with an intensity that wasn't about hunting. I brushed it off. I figured he had a deal on his mind, or problems at home. I trusted him, that was my mistake. I turned my back to him for a moment, looking out over the quiet water, taking in the peace of it all. That's when I heard it, the soft but unmistakable click of the safety coming off his shotgun. Time slowed down. I spun around and my world stopped. He was 10 feet away, aiming the barrel right at my face. It didn't make sense. My brain short-circuited. "David, what are you doing?" I stammered, a laugh catching in my throat because this had to be a joke. It had to be, but his face was a mask of cold indifference. "It's nothing personal," he said, and the absolute lack of emotion in his voice told me this was real. "This is for the money, Jake." The blast was a deafening roar that ripped through the silence. The pain was a white-hot flash that consumed everything, a fiery explosion in my chest and shoulder. I was thrown backwards by the force, my head hitting the ground. The last thing I felt was the shock of the freezing water as he shoved my limp body into the lake. Then darkness, as I sank into the cold. I'm sure he stood there for a moment, watching the ripples fade, convinced his problems were sinking with me. But what he didn't count on was that some men are just too stubborn to die. I woke up in absolute agony, gasping for air on a muddy bank miles downstream. The current had carried me. The icy water that was meant to hide my body had shocked my system and slowed the bleeding enough to keep me alive. I was a wreck, but I was alive. He thought his problem was solved, but he'd made his one critical mistake. He wasn't there to watch me take my last breath. My first instinct was pure rage. But then a chilling realization washed over me. As far as the world was concerned, Jake Miller was dead. If I went to the police, it was my word against two people who would swear it was a tragic accident. They would finish the job, so I vanished. I stumbled through the woods for 2 days, living on adrenaline and fury, until I reached an old, forgotten fishing cabin my grandfather had left me. It was my sanctuary. It became my base of operations. A week later, I saw my own death announcement in a newspaper from a nearby town. I was a ghost, and from the shadows, I started to watch them. I saw my wife, the grieving widow, put on a convincing performance for the community. And a few days later, from the edge of the cemetery, hidden by the trees, I watched my own funeral. I saw her clutching David's hand for support. They thought they were free. They were wrong. The haunting began subtly. I used the spare key to the house they didn't know I had. I didn't take anything. I just moved things. I took his favorite hunting knife from the kitchen drawer and laid it on the center of their bed. Right on his pillow, a few nights later, I left a single, muddy footprint by the back door. The same mud from the lake where he'd left me for dead. I wanted them to feel haunted, not by a ghost, but by the terrifying possibility that I wasn't gone. I watched them descend into paranoia. Through their window, I saw David checking the locks 3, 4 times a night. I saw my wife jump at every creak of the floorboards. They started arguing, their hushed, frantic whispers carrying on the night air. They were terrified, desperate to get the full insurance payout and run. They rushed their wedding. They didn't know they were just planning the venue for their own downfall. Their wedding day was beautiful, held at a fancy reception hall. It was the perfect public scene for my final act. My wife walked down the aisle in a flowing white dress, a dress bought with the first advance on my life insurance. David stood at the altar, beaming, believing he had gotten away with it all. I had spent the last week planning, posing as a freelance photographer. I learned the name of their wedding planner and DJ. A simple phone call, pretending to be from the venue's tech support, confirmed the schedule. During the reception, the time came for the traditional slideshow, a celebration of their love story. The lights dimmed, the guests smiled, but I had swapped the thumb drive, posing as a member of the catering staff. I'd simply walked up to the DJ and handed him the correct drive, saying the maid of honor had made last-minute changes. The screen lit up, not with their photos, but with a picture of me and David on our first-ever hunting trip 10 years ago, arms around each other, smiling. The romantic music died. The room fell silent. Then a new video began to play. It was me. My face was scarred and bruised from where the shotgun pellets had grazed me, but I was undeniably alive. I had filmed it in the woods. Right by the lake, I looked straight into the camera. "Hello, honey, surprise you too," I said, my voice echoing through the silent hall. "You can't collect a life insurance policy for a man who isn't dead." I held up a copy of the policy. "You thought this was a ticket to a new life, but it's an evidence tag for attempted murder." Chaos erupted. David's face went white. My wife screamed a name that wasn't his, but mine, but it was too late. I had already sent a full, unedited version of my testimony and evidence to the police, who were waiting quietly at the back of the venue. I watched from a car across the street as they were led away in handcuffs. Their wedding outfit's a cruel joke against the cold steel. They didn't get their honeymoon. They got a holding cell. The life they stole from me was a fantasy that lasted only a few short months. They tried to erase me, but in the end, they only revealed who they truly were. Rebuilding my life has been a slow process. Explaining to my daughter, Maya, that the man she had just started to call her stepfather tried to murder her father has been the hardest part. How do you tell a child that her mother was part of it? There are no easy words for that, but we're healing together. I didn't wait for years for my revenge. I waited just long enough for them to feel safe in the life they had stolen. Was exposing them in front of everyone they knew the ultimate justice? Or should I have just gone to the police the moment I crawled out of that grave? Let me know in the comments.